Welcome to Your Next Bold Move. Our show is all about helping you take your next step, whether it's career or relationships or life in general. Hi, and welcome to Your Next Bold Move. My name is Wendy Kaplan. Our guest today is Len Schlesinger. Len is president of Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and he's the co-author of a new book just published by the Harvard Business Review called Just Start: How to Succeed at Work and Life in an Increasingly Unpredictable World. So Len, thanks for being here today.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
So you've been an entrepreneur for years. So what would you recommend to people who are thinking about this?
Stop thinking. Because in this environment, oftentimes thinking becomes an excuse and generates the paralysis that actually keeps people from engaging in entrepreneurial behavior. Right. So if you want to understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur, for God's sake, be an entrepreneur and do something and try something and take a step and get started. We all get to listen to all of these hysterical stories about these entrepreneurs who spent years trying to find market niches and then spend another set of years being able to leverage all of their family assets and then hanging from a mountaintop, wait for their customer to come in. Then they hit it big. They write a big book telling their life story all over again. And then what ends up happening is you and I hear that life story and say, it couldn't be me. I don't have the money. I don't have the big idea. There are a million ways that I can exclude myself from entrepreneurial behavior. And there's only one way to include myself in entrepreneurial behavior, and that's to act.
You do need a business plan, and you do need some money at some point.
At some point in the process, you have to have clarity about a launch plan and an operational strategy. That's not at the start, okay? Right. We have a venture accelerator here at Babson that over the last several years replaced our traditional incubator. And in the incubator, we'd have the normal business planning competition, and we'd have lots of people spending months in their courses, dotting I's and crossing T's, and most of it is nonsense. And quite honestly, the process of developing the plan got in the way of the process of developing the idea. And if we're trying to actually start a small entrepreneurial venture, that message of stop thinking and start doing is absolutely at the core of what it's going to take to actually learn what you need to do to actually build something substantive.
Right.
You need to test your ideas, you need to see who will buy. Then and only then do you need to obsess about how to make it, how to develop it, how to launch it, and how to build the economic model.
That's great. So you've written a book with Charlie Kiefer that we talked about last month, and Just Start, and which works people through the process.
Yeah. Just Start would have never happened if we didn't actually just start.
Right. How does the thinking stuff that we were talking about and just starting apply to some other businesses either that you've seen other people run?
When you look at a place like Starbucks, everybody visualizes, by the time the books were all done, it was, this man had this deep passion for creating an authentic Italian espresso bar in the United States. And so he went off from Seattle to Italy and had a vision, and Starbucks was born. And the reality is, like many of us, this was an entrepreneur who actually cared deeply about coffee, who actually developed a robust business plan at a terrible time in the market for actually being able to attract funds for coffee. Right. But by George, he was absolutely committed to it. In Just New, Nancy Kane, a historian, documented that he took this business plan to 252 people, and the vast majority of them thought it was completely idiotic, so he couldn't raise anywhere near the amount of money. So he started something much smaller. He started a chain called Il Giornale, a chain, one-unit chain. It had nonstop opera music. It had a menu that was completely in Italian. It had baristas wearing tuxedo outfits. So what did he discover the first 5 days? No surprise, they didn't love the place. Yep. Okay? Now, what do you do when, in fact, you discover they don't love it? If you're a successful serial entrepreneur, if you're someone committed to just getting started and moving on, you figure that the 1,465 upset customers who didn't really enjoy your place are the source of all of the wisdom for what comes next.
Right.
You talk to them. And so my argument very simply is that Starbucks was born of the co-creation activities of Howard Schultz and a collection of customers in what otherwise would have been defined as a failure.
Absolutely.
Okay? But really, his ability to turn that into the data and the support and the commitment of this population of people who at least expressed interest in paying $4 for an espresso-based beverage
Right.
was really the source of the wisdom that created both the concept and the market.
Right.
I honestly don't believe that anybody's operating business looks anything like the plan they developed.
I would agree with
And
you.
so the reality is you can look at that and say, oh my God, this is a complete failure.
Right.
Okay? Or you can basically say, isn't it wonderful that you actually managed to quickly divorce yourself from a plan that became obvious it wasn't working?
Yeah.
Over the past several years, it was all about fail fast, fail often, fail cheap. Okay? The new language of entrepreneurship is you pivot. Okay?
Pivot.
Yeah, and essentially it says
Pivot.
nothing ever ends up the way in which you think it's going to end up. And so the reality is you pivot. And so people are studying business plans, people are studying business ventures, and all of a sudden it hasn't got a stigmatized language system of failure.
Yeah, that's good.
So once you discover that everything you dreamt about, fantasized about, or planned for wasn't what you want to do, what do you do with that? What we have is a portfolio of 4 or 5 undergraduates and 4 or 5 graduate students who really turned it into magic and ended up in their pivot, ending up doing extraordinary things that none of them could have ever dreamt about before they got in the middle of the day-to-day in an experience in an environment like this.
At any point in life, you cannot predict what your future is going to look like, period.
So sometimes there's this marvelous opportunity to live and actually make hay out of the opportunities and conversations that emerge.
That's great. So what excites you today about entrepreneurship?
There is a picture for me about a world that is increasingly touched by the tools that are available to people to take action on things that they care about. It is a world that is able to address not only issues of economics, but issues of human outcomes and sustainability-oriented outcomes. Here at Babson, we were one of the first schools to endorse the UN Principles for Responsible Management Education, to recognize that there is a new capitalism that is able to address the issues of economic, human, and sustainability outcomes simultaneously rather than sequentially. So I'm driven by a set of principles, and I'm driven by a set of beliefs.
Which is exactly the point of all of this, right? To see, as Charlie also talked about last month, to see what you really care about, what you're driven by. You said your beliefs.
Reid Hoffman, one of the founders of LinkedIn, wrote a book called The Startup of You. And what he does is really in tandem with what we talk about, essentially say we need to understand that in today's environment, everybody has a responsibility to construct and live a more entrepreneurial life. If people can absolutely bring the capacity to find and make opportunities as they walk down the street, why can't we call that entrepreneurship? Why can't we be inclusive, okay? Rather than having hero
this really
worship,
private thing
hero
that
worship
nobody
that's
can-
private,
right.
that locks us all out.
Right.
For the vast majority of us, the way you get good is to practice, and the way you practice is to take the next step.
Right, and practice the things that you're good at. It's all about each of us.
And,
so I think
and
that's
the
what's
reality is,
challenging.
quite honestly, for a lot of people, they've been excluded from the process of actually thinking about what they might want to do. It's all programmed.
Yeah.
And you demonstrate your capacity as a human being by being able to stand up, raise your hand, get called on, and recite the things that we already know correctly.
Right.
Okay? And there's a marvelous editorial in the Journal of Cell Biology that essentially says, you know, instead of celebrating, reciting things we already know, why don't we raise our hand, okay, revel in our ignorance, and use our ignorance and curiosity to make great discoveries.
Thank you so much for joining us, Len.
Enormous fun. Look forward to engaging with you again.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us today. And in addition to the resources and ideas shared by Len, you can go online to our other website at themagicparties.com, where you can get some free support and inspiration. And thanks to our listeners. You are meant to go forth in the world to use your gifts and talents.